All right, here we go. Episode one of the
Chris Smith,
Daniel and Chris, or Chris and Daniel, Chris. I don't know which way around it is. The podcast, the
the
no name podcast. We still got to figure that out, right?
scientists and engineers. That's an ode to the great Killer Mike song from his album Michael that won the Grammy Award for Rap Album of the Year. You know about that, yeah?
Yeah, not necessarily talking to my genre there.
Right.
Englishman didn't get a lot of that. It didn't make it. It was back when tapes didn't go across the Atlantic.
Fair. Well, hey, listen, this is the 2023 or 2024 Grammy winning rap album of the year. This is very current stuff, but
Oh,
clearly,
okay, all right. So I'm way off.
clearly you're not a man of
Oh
rap.
yeah, exactly. I guess not. No, I sit at home and watch a 6-year-old son, so I don't get out much.
Yeah, well, listen, your accent also told me that you probably didn't know what was coming with a rap.
Yeah.
So,
So there we
uh,
go.
podcast name to be determined. How about that?
That's it. Yeah. The TBD Tech Talk Tech podcast. That could work actually. So anyway, um, we are going to be talking about tech, the channel, whatever comes along. But Daniel is taking the channel by storm, and I've been very impressed with him. So I wanted to kind of just set him up to let him go because I love to listen to what he's got to say, and he's definitely right now on a crusade to figure out what is going on in the channel and do effectively what we should all be doing, which is what's right for the customer. So, how did you get that, Daniel? Talk to me a little bit about what the focus is and how you got there.
Yeah, I grew up in the VAR space, traditional reseller, but it was boutique VARs that prioritized engineering, so lots of pro serve and deployments. And the best sales advice that I ever got was from it was an engineer at my very first job who said, "Don't hang out with the salespeople, go hang out with engineers and learn to do it like that." Great advice, the best advice. So naturally, I grew up around engineers who focused on building and designing and architecture, and I gravitated toward that. I like that way better. The sales stuff is lame. Salespeople are lame, and that's a dumb way to try to do it. Um, and so, as a result, um, when I worked at VARs, the one thing that I did find peculiar is that the salespeople, and they'd say this, like they would verbalize it and say, "We want to custom make solutions just for you." And I even had a sales manager that a part of his talk track was, "We started this company because we got tired of vendors sliding the same proposal across the desk. So they all work for manufacturers, like the big guys selling storage and stuff. And they didn't think that it was compelling or ethical to just send the same proposal across the desk. But as I worked there, I recognized they're just sending the same thing across the desk every time. What are we doing?"
Changing the title.
Yeah, none of it was transparent at all, and I hated that. That was an easy way for me to just slowly die in place. Um, and it just didn't resonate with me. I'm not interested in having a million customers or all of the customers. I want to find the right ones that value the type of work that we do, and we actually get along, and we have a cool experience. Like try to ideally become friends if we can. And the only way that I can do that is um, if I make my North Star providing them value and working for them, like
Hmm.
aiding them on their journey and helping them avoid pitfalls and providing solutions that actually have an outcome that they predefine.
Yeah,
And so
and
that
I think that
means,
makes sense.
yeah, I can't just prioritize one vendor, right? I have to prioritize who is correct and actually meets the value proposition requirements for the project, and then go deliver that solution. So as a result, it makes us agnostic to vendors, and we're trying to build cool stuff.
Hmm. And I think that maybe you've hit something on the head there. It's you take time up front to figure out exactly what the client's looking for, and then figure out which solutions match to some extent or to the entirety of what they're trying to do. I mean, and as kind of on the provider side of things, I think that's invaluable because a number of times I get leads that have no detail, I have no idea what they want, so I go in blind and put solutions together. And I'm not, I mean, I can pretty good at extrapolating what a manufacturing client is going to want from a cloud environment. But at the end of the day, without those very specific kind of milestones, goals, business requirements, it's very difficult to give them exactly what they want. And then as a result, you potentially end up with a solution that doesn't make the right, it doesn't fit, or it isn't right. And I was actually, I talk about this a lot with friends of our competitors. I always say there's enough business for all of us, and I feel like deals have they're like a fingerprint. There's like a unique approach to every deal, and every deal has a home. And there's nothing worse than winning the deal that you shouldn't have won, and that's worse than losing it. So it's kind of interesting. But like I said, there is enough business for all those suppliers. So you don't necessarily have to force yourself into a deal that doesn't make sense. And that's like you said, if you can get ahead of it and get the requirements done and buttoned up before we even get involved, that's great. I mean, and then we can just figure out what's provider specific, get those questions asked.
Even so, if you look at your sales leaders, if they're even being true to what they believe of the traditional sales methodology, qualification is a part of that process. And you've heard the old adage that the best way to lose is to lose early. So if you know that you're not the correct fit, what are you doing? Um, the more that we can professionalize our industry so that we get rid of the folks that are just trying to ink deals like used car salesmen, and we get more folks who are looking for the correct product market fit, the better we all are. You are correct. The worst thing that you can do is to sell a deal where it's not a bad fit. Just speaking on the pure economics of it, you're as a vendor, you're about to waste, and this is a technical term that you'll appreciate as an engineer. You're about to spend a butt ton of time, right? Trying to deploy this and scope it,
Yeah.
and like you ink a deal, and
Hmm.
you've got to. There's this whole workflow on the back end that you have to do just to. There's the
There it
bubbles to
is.
process this thing. So why would you want to ink that deal to start with? Lose it early if you know that it's not a correct fit for your product or your solution or your services, whatever. Like get
Hmm.
out of there early.
Yeah, exactly. And not that I've ever done that, of course. But there was a deal in I think it was Utah that probably wasn't the right fit, and I think the sales guy and I spent the majority of the following year not making our number because we were dealing with post-sale, post-provisioning type issues with this client that probably wasn't the right fit. And then a lot of that wasn't on us. I mean, the client didn't know what they wanted. They pivoted halfway. But if you can get that nailed down ahead of time and potentially figure out that the client isn't going to know what they want and probably would never be happy, then at least you can get ahead of it. But I mean, that is what it is. Lessons learned and bit down the road. So talk to me a little bit. What are you learning right now? What's top of mind?
Yeah, so there's two primary things that are consuming a lot of my time right now. We operate across the spectrum of IT. We're genuinely trying to be a full stack consulting company. That means I don't want to sell you like laptops and printers and that type of commodity stuff. I'm trying to work on like cool projects. And so right now, CX is consuming a ton of my time. We've been presented with a number of unique and large scale contact center projects that go beyond just a simple sales cycle where I'm producing ROIs for businesses to show them how you're going to be able to consume more orders, produce more sales, speed up your entire order or sales process, and it's going to produce this defined ROI on the other side. And integrate that across your suite of products from your CRM to your ERP to enable both your internal agents along with your end users to self-service and just speed this whole process up so you're offering multi or omni channels to be specific so that they can consume those products and services at their leisure. And then, of course, the other is in the public cloud space of learning the best ways to optimize the billing, security, and the overall administration. Which you know what I think you're doing a bunch of that. That's on your learning track, yeah.
It is, it is. That's something a big thing I'm focusing on is FinOps. Obviously, I got some of the technical track down, But the accounting, the FinOps, the cloud spend optimization, as it used to be called, which I don't know, I think that perhaps makes more sense than FinOps, but it is definitely on my kind of focus list because I feel like if I can architect a solution and find money from other sources by finding efficiencies, then it just makes that sale that much easier. And I mean, there's so many stories of organizations just spending outrageously on the public cloud because they just don't have any controls. And FinOps, one of the core kind of pillars of FinOps is building a cloud-focused team around kind of guardrails around what developers can and can't do, or what administrators can and can't do inside the public cloud, and just putting guardrails around it to make sure it doesn't go crazy. And obviously, the simplest one is just labeling, like knowing what you've got in your environment and having it labeled to a developer so that somebody's accountable for that item or line of kind of billing inside of AWS or Azure. But it's yeah, not the most exciting, but for some reason I gravitate towards it. Maybe it's something to do with my personality. I'm not sure. I think it might be.
Well, listen, I think it's very exciting. I love that stuff because it's compelling. It actually provides a real value to an end user. Like, I'm going to give you a service that you have to consume. Like, you need the infrastructure one way or the other.
Hmm.
What if I can deliver it to you in a format that is actually cheaper, or it provides another ROI or additional sources of revenue on the other side so that the TCO is much lower? This is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. No, it
perfect.
resonates.
So here's another one. This is a dovetail from there. One of the trends that we saw in 2023 was repatriation out of public cloud back to colo, private cloud, and on-prem.
Hmm.
Some mixture of that. Um, Most of that is from initial companies that landed in the public cloud running VMware like for like, which 20 to 30% more expensive to do it that way. That's the most expensive way to consume VMware is in AWS, Azure, Google public cloud.
Hmm.
So we saw a lot of those folks come back. And times it's AI companies and tech companies who were birthed in the cloud because they were a startup, and as they matured, the cost was too great. They came back.
Yep.
But
I would say there's a tipping point with the startups. So
yeah,
they get their series, whatever it is, funding, and then an accountant comes in and go, "What the hell are you guys doing here?" And then suddenly
yeah,
things start having to come back again. So there's certainly a kind of economies of scale that happens within a startup. Then they get big enough, and then suddenly that accountant starts looking at things. Anyway, I interrupted.
no, but you're exactly right. We see that. So in data center land, one of the major trends is vacancy rates for data centers right now, right? And they're sitting
Oh
at
yeah.
3% nationally. And in some cases, we're seeing entire facilities being bought sight unseen, like all capacity being procured. Even facilities that are in construction right now are selling out in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, we're
it's
seeing it.
it's these companies that are coming out of public cloud. It's also private AI stacks. People don't want that being or sitting in a public cloud. I get why that's dangerous. But what's kind of throwing a wrench in this whole thing, Chris, is people came back on prem because they were running those VMware workloads, and then Broadcom
Yep,
decided
that's exactly what I was going to say. So
everybody
it'd be
kicked
interesting
their
to see
ass
how this
out.
plays out.
Yeah,
Because it skews the numbers, right? I mean, if you've had a spreadsheet discussion with your leadership and you said we're gonna save X amount of dollars, and then Broadcom comes in and then increases your licensing, suddenly that margin that you were expecting to get is almost no, it's not going to disappear, but it's definitely made that decision much more difficult. So it'll be interesting to be a fly on the wall this year to find out those conversations that people are having about coming back, whether it actually happens. I mean, I've literally had nothing but conversations about Broadcom for the last 2 months. It's been ridiculous. I mean, we've blown all our kind of targets out of the water around kind of pipeline and everything else that goes on. But there's still a lot of hesitancy around because there's still so many unknowns. There's still we've had probably a month now since the firm announcement came out, but really no hard facts around it. I mean, I'm working a little bit with some licensing providers to try and figure out, and the numbers are certainly going up. I mean, there's no question about that. But um, it's hard to tell exactly how much impact it's going to have on those kind of small, medium, maybe small enterprise businesses that I talk to mostly. But right now, people are sitting on their hands just to kind of wait, see. You seen the same thing?
Yeah, all those CIOs that built their project plan to move out of the public cloud and go back on-prem, and they calculated all this money that they're going to save. Broadcom showed up and said, "Hold my beer. We'll see about
Yeah,
that.
exactly. I love some of
We'll see about
that.
that." So on average, what I'm seeing with the bulk of our end users is a 300 to 500% increase in their VMware costs year over year.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a flat increase, um, and if you were consuming enterprise stuff like that, it's probably 300%. But for the folks that were on standard or tools like that, well, that's going away. So now you're going to be closer to 500%.
Yeah, yeah, and I was also reading about the non-profit sector, like the universities and any other what was it whatever the designation is for a non-profit. They're not going to get any of that the licensing. Also, I think the not for resale has gone away as well. So I mean, those guys that used to get sweetheart deals aren't going to get those, and they'll be back in the mainstream. So that's going to be really tough for them.
Yeah, that's unplanned, unbudgeted, and it's going to hit them very, very hard. Everybody in SLED is in a tough spot right now. The highest I've seen is a 10x increase. That's a crazy one.
Hmm.
That's really hard to deal with. So, what do you think happens from here? So, do you think, and I'll float, I'm also a conspiracy theory guy, so maybe have on some of that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe that's
Uh,
the podcast.
yeah. What do you think what's the evolution of that? So, in my perfect world, what I hope will happen is that we all get creative, and this is the catalyst that leads to the next evolution of of data center. So VMware revolutionized the space, right, with virtualization. What's next?
Hmm. I mean, we're all fans of capitalism and the free market and everything else, right? I mean, VMware maybe got a bit too big for their boots. They definitely had a very large market share. So having multiple players in this space isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's lots of names that I would never have heard of. I mean, Proxmox being one, and a few others that I just won't scale. I just wouldn't have never really dug into because we're so focused on VMware. But now I mean, I wouldn't say I understand them, but I have an understanding of what they do and how they do it and how they differentiate from VMware. So having that is not necessarily a bad thing, and then that's good for should be good for pricing economics for the end client as well. But from my perspective, I think it's a chance for organizations to take a little bit of a step back, and I potentially think that's what we're seeing right now. People are getting their house in order to then figure out exactly what they have and to then take that step and do that business transformation. We've been talking about business transformation for what, 5 years, I think, at least, probably longer. Like this is your next iteration of infrastructure, but hopefully, I mean, this is the breather or the catalyst that you need to then to then take that next step. But the first thing you got to do is audit your internal systems and figure out what you got to then figure out where it fits best. I mean, network connectivity is the best that it's ever been and the simplest it's ever been. The ability to do multi-cloud as well as hybrid clouds, and we talked a little bit about multi-cloud earlier. That has its own level of complexity, but there really is no reason you can't have even in a small organization, multiple infrastructures on different platforms because it just makes sense. And you take advantage of the tooling, you take advantage of the skills you've got in house. But again, you can't do any of that until you've figured out what you got and where it fits best. And that's probably a pretty good skill, and it's going to take some time. But certainly, I'm sure there's something you guys can help with as well, right?
Yeah, this is like a constant conversation for us. So I live in Alabama. Alabama feels 10 years behind major urban markets. Maybe folks in Alabama won't love hearing that, but that's the reality. We are behind. You have some outliers who are very progressive, and you have some large organizations that certainly have advanced footprints. But the bulk of what I see in the Southeast, even, is fairly traditional. An example, and this is going to sound it's going to sound like something from the dark ages to you. I was on site with an end user today, or I'm sorry, Monday of this week. Today's Friday. They are a $500 million organization. They have a global footprint. They're a sizable organization. They have 1,000 employees, and they said something that I've heard for the past decade, which is, we were buying all these SaaS applications now, and we noticed that our data center footprint on-prem is shrinking. Well, yeah, of course.
Hmm.
So that's a trend that now people in these markets are starting to wake up and realize, like, oh, well, our data centers are going to change anyway. Like, that's just the nature of what all this looks like. There are certain refreshes that they take part in that are showing them that SaaS is a gateway drug to the cloud for them. So I think that we are finally going to wholesale come into an ecosystem by which all end users are consuming a true hybrid cloud approach. There's going to
Hmm.
be some stuff that stays on-prem, sure, or lives in a colo, but the expansion that we're going to see into private cloud and public cloud and SaaS is going to speed up, and it's going to happen at a rapid pace.
Hmm. No, I think you're right. And this is the Broadcom just it's just speeding that up even faster. So
Yeah, it's like
that makes
fuel on the
sense.
fire, and it
Hmm.
makes people go on that path even faster.
Hmm. All right, so we are at 20 minutes, and I think we're probably going to start losing people because I don't know, my attention span certainly isn't 20 minutes, but this has been very interesting. So anyway, a bit of fun. Incidentally, the soccer team in Birmingham is called the Birmingham Legion. I've said that right? Or was it Birmingham? How do you have to say that?
Well, that's how you would say it,
That's how I
sir.
would say it, yeah, yeah. And then incidentally, the San Diego rugby team is called the San Diego Legion, which is where my affiliation or my alliance is. So we are going to do a quick update on that. So San Diego Legion is very early in the season. They've played three, they've won two, so that's not terrible. But the rugby season is a fair amount shorter than the soccer season, and your football team, as I should call it, is you actually I looked at the season. It runs till like the end of August or something. It goes on forever.
Actually, my dog, and I'm going to look this up just to make sure I don't tell you wrong. We're running until like the end of
Oh
September
no,
or
yeah.
October.
October 26th, you're playing the Oakland Roots.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
way
that's
out
right.
there.
We have an exceedingly long schedule, and we really heat up in the dead of summer. So that means we're going to sweat our butts off in
Hmm.
Birmingham
Yeah, right.
watching football. Listen, if
Hmm.
you say that in front of a native Alabamian, they're going to shank you, Chris.
I already know
They're
that.
not going to like it at all. But listen, we're off to a good start.
Hey, I've been to a gun range in Alabama. I can survive pretty much anything.
I was fortunate to grow up in a trailer park in South Alabama, so I know these people. They are my own. Um, Also, San Diego, low key, top five city in the U.S.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we miss it a lot out there. It was a lot of fun to live there.
Yeah,
All right,
very
all
cute
right.
now.
So we are going to get this posted. We'll get it out there. We still need to figure out a name for it. We could do the week that was, or the conspiracy theories of Daniel. That could be good, but we'll figure that out. But anyway, I think if unless you got anything else, let's wrap this up for episode one.
Yeah, and listen, if people actually listen to this, other than like our mothers, I would.
I tell my mum a lesson.
Yeah, that's right. My mom's not going to pay attention to this. 5 minutes in, and
It's
she's
done.
she's done, and then she's going to ask me to fix her iPhone. Um, so if folks have like content or segments that they would like us to cover, let's do that.
Hmm. Perfect. All right. See you next week.
Adios.